This is the Baymall Podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host, Brent Billings. Today, we're joined by Catherine McNiel, an author, speaker, and hospital chaplain who likes to mingle theology with real life on the ground. She's an MDiv student at North Park Seminary and the author of Fearing Bravely, which we'll be discussing today. Catherine and her husband live in the Chicago suburbs where she cares for 3 kids, 2 jobs, and 1 enormous garden. She's on the lookout for wisdom, beauty, and iced coffee, which are things that I'm not, wisdom and beauty, sure. Iced coffee, not so much. So I love that little bit of color that I got in the intro, Catherine, but welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you too.
And I would invite you to add any more color to the simple sketch that I've offered here. Tell us a little bit of the finer things about your life or your family or whatever you want to share.
Well, absolutely. Life is very full for me right now. I've got 3 teenagers, so there's no end of something going on. My oldest is 18 and in his senior year. Another thing that keeps our lives very full is it's that enormous garden that you mentioned in the bio. It's probably more enormous than the average listener is imagining. We typically plant about 170 tomato plants alone each year.
Oh my goodness.
And I would defy you to list a vegetable we have not at least attempted to grow. So it is between teenagers and plants. My life is very full, but it's full of growth, so that's fun.
My parents had 3 tomato plants basically my whole childhood until I left the home, and we were always we couldn't eat tomatoes enough and fast enough. I can't even imagine what you're doing with 100 and some wowzers.
We sell a lot of vegetables off of our front porch, kind of like a lemonade stand that never ends.
Oh, yes.
And we have a lot of fun, especially the teenagers, doing that. And then we make a lot of spaghetti sauce.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
We eat a lot of spaghetti. Yes, indeed.
Well, I'm curious about the hospital chaplaincy, which was not in my original version of the bio, which I just pulled it from Amazon, and I'm like, well, we'll see. Even the enormous garden, I was like, do I need the word enormous? It turns out I do.
You did.
So
yeah,
I'm glad important. I kept that in. But I'm interested in your hospital chaplaincy. That's a new thing for you. How'd you get into that?
It's been a long time goal of mine. I have always been kind of pastoral by nature, if not by profession, and my very first job when I was 16 years old was working as a registered nurse's assistant in a nursing home. And I thought to myself, I don't know that I'm cut out for caring for people's medical or physical needs, but I love the component of being with them emotionally and spiritually during whatever crisis has brought them to our facility. So it's been a long time coming, but here I am finally making that dream a reality. So I love getting called into emergent situations and being able to meet people in some of their hardest moments of life with a calm, hopefully caring presence, and help them to get through. It's been a really special, sacred next step for me.
Yeah, those are beautiful words to use with that. When I got hired at Impact, there was a question on the employment application, what part of ministry do you hate the most? And I used to always say death in hospitals. So I really appreciate people that I'm getting better as I get older, and just growing spiritually and theologically, but it's still one of those most uncomfortable places. And I love people that maybe they wouldn't call it comfortable and enjoyment, but they gravitate to those spaces as something sacred.
I do.
Now, you also mentioned this, to us, you mentioned you're on this slow MDiv journey. I have just started my own graduate study, and it's going to be slow too. Like, it's just one class at a time, one class at a time. And what has that been like, and what have you enjoyed? Is that connected to does your chaplaincy kind of get worked into that MDiv program, or how does that work?
Yeah, those are very much connected. And this also is a longtime dream, finally reaching some level of fulfillment. Again, when I was probably 7 years old, I could have told you I wanted to go to seminary, but between one thing and another, I was in my 40s before I started. So I feel extremely grateful that the path that God has me on has finally led here. And it is a very slow burn. I'm getting the Master of Divinity, which is a very large degree, but I'm enjoying every minute of it. I'm almost 5 years in, so the end is in sight. And one of the reasons I did it was it is one of the qualifications required for most chaplaincy jobs. And it also did include the clinical pastoral education, which is a requirement for chaplaincy as well. So those definitely dovetail together.
Well, that is just beautiful work. I mean, yeah, the Bible says mingle theology with real life on the ground. I think you're doing more than mingling. I think you're really like in the trenches. So yeah, same for Marty. As for me, those things are not my forte. So absolutely appreciate that work so much. But I'd love to know like how you know Marty, how you know Bema, like what brings you here today? How did we all get connected?
Well, I met Bema through Marty, and I think I met Marty through our books. I first heard of Marty when our shared editor, the editor of some of our books at least, sent me his manuscript, if I'm remembering this correctly, and asked if I could write a blurb for it. And I sat down to read it and absolutely loved it. It was asking better questions of the Bible. And I could not have been more thrilled to add my name to the book endorsements and process. It was absolutely spectacular. So I was excited to chat a little bit with Marty over email after that. And I think, Marty, that's probably how you found me and my books, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I can remember. So I'm on this brand new adventure. I've signed this new contract. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't have any interaction with NavPress, like personally, and I get invited into this private Facebook group for the authors at NavPress. And they do this introductory post, and I'm just like super nervous. And like the first person that like, I can't remember if you liked it or loved it or said hello or something. And the first positive was Catherine, just bang, popped in there. And then her name showed up again when Caitlin said, hey, she's going to do an endorsement. And I was just so deep. Everything was so new.
Yeah.
That Catherine became this like friend of mine. And I realized when she jumped on the Zoom call, this is like the closest we've actually ever come to meeting in person.
Absolutely.
Because it's been like this online distant friendship. But it's just an author buddy. And yeah, I did. I got Fearing Bravely and started reading your stuff. I loved Fearing Bravely. It was such a great book.
Thank you.
Which is really what I wanted to spend time. I want to talk about all your stuff today, but selfishly, I want to talk about my favorite book of yours, Fearing Bravely, Risking Love for Our Neighbors, Strangers, and Enemies. And I'll start by reading the back of the book. First of all, the first statement, we have so many reasons to be afraid. Some of them good, by the way. Like we have some good reasons to be afraid.
Absolutely.
Some of them not good, but we have some good. Yet Jesus says, do not fear. Everywhere we turn, we're bombarded by fear. This world we love can be an unpredictable and chaotic place. Sometimes it feels like everything we hold dear is fragile. But Christ followers are called to enter this world and love our neighbors, take care of strangers, love and pray for even our enemies. Jesus said his followers would be recognized not by our labels, but by our love, a love that conquers fear. Paragraph later, on Fearing Bravely, Catherine McNiel invites us on a journey through our very real fears into love. You don't have to live in fear. You can be made alive and set free by the love of God. Will you follow Jesus? I have seen a lot of comments from other people about, like, some books seem to like, okay, it's this is the year of this new book. And then some books seem to have like this unique staying power. Like I've noticed in the Twitterverse and in social media, like I notice people coming back now years later to this. It seems like it has a shelf life that has continued beyond just its publication. What has that been like? And what is the larger reaction to this book, and what has that been like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I hope that's true. I hope it has staying power. I definitely wrote it with the hope that it would, because our fears are evergreen. I think the comments I get from people are, it took them by surprise, that they have been surprised. They thought that I was probably not talking to them, that they knew this already. They know what Jesus says, but that they found something in it that challenged them and or inspired them, that they found something in it that was for them, and that they were surprised by that. And I've heard from pastors who have used it in a sermon series. I've heard from professors that have used it in their classes. I've heard from book clubs and Bible studies. And I'm glad for that, because I did intentionally, I wrote it. It's a book. It's not a workbook. It's something that you could sit down and read with a cup of coffee, but or iced coffee. But
yeah, I was going to say iced coffee.
Yeah.
Love it.
But I'm hoping that people will read it in community, because a lot of what I'm saying is that Jesus is calling us together to live in a way that is in opposition to this fear-mongering way of life that we're often being discipled into.
As we record, we're actually pre-election. As the episode comes out, it will be post-election. So we don't even know what's going to happen. And that kind of doesn't matter, because, as you said, our fears are evergreen.
Yeah.
But is there, do you think that this book has anything particular to say for elections, or is it, I mean, it's bigger than that.
Yeah.
But what can we take away from the fears? Because we've already, even at this point, I don't even want to say what day we're recording, because tomorrow everything could change.
Everything will be different. Yeah.
Crazy things have already happened. And I'm sure more crazy things will come to pass. And all of these fears just get us wound up. So what can we take away from this idea of disconnecting from that fear entirely?
It's interesting, because I pitched this book. I outlined it, had kind of the main flow of it all worked out before 2020, but I wrote the book in 2020. And as no one has forgotten, we were in the midst of the early days of a global pandemic. We were in the middle of another volatile election season in the United States. But then it came out in 2022. So we were in a different place than when I wrote it. We were in a different place than when I first envisioned it. So it's been interesting to see how it's kind of grown through that whole process. But to answer your question, I very intentionally did not write this about politics. I don't talk about the pandemic. I don't talk about the political system in the United States, but I do I tell a lot of stories about what Jesus taught. And I look at Jesus' social location and the social location of the early church, and I see that when Jesus was saying, "Don't be afraid," they were actually in an incredibly dangerous scenario. Almost every time that God or Jesus is saying, "Don't be afraid," it's not because there's no danger. He's not saying everything's fine. Nothing is fine. But he's saying there's something bigger going on, and you're going to be able to function here if you can focus on love and not on fear. And that's, I think, what I'm wanting to do in this book, whether it's an election cycle or not, whether we're in a pandemic or not, whether there's difficult things happening in the news or not. There are so many voices around us that are exploiting our fears so that they can gain their own narrative, their own power. And Jesus, in the midst of all of this, is not denying the dangers, not saying there's no reason to be afraid. But I believe Jesus is inviting us to live a different kind of life where we are no longer slaves to fear. And instead, we are working together to create an environment where love is our guiding light and not our fears.
Yes, I was one of those people that you mentioned a moment ago, Catherine, where I would have probably assumed yeah, I'm going to love this book. I kind of already know what it's going to say.
Yeah.
And then it's so on my Goodreads review, I went back there to remember because I read this, back when closer to its publication. So I had to go back and look at what I wrote. And my first lines of my review, holy smokes, this was a book. Another read that completely snuck up on me, that same impulse that some people shared with you. wasn't expecting, but it really was. I said, McNiel places you in good hands as she encourages us to say yes to the challenging yoke of Jesus and his call to love everyone. The book is practical, poetic, profound. It ushers a clarion call and a prophetic challenge to Jesus followers today to consider what it means to love our neighbors, strangers, and enemies. Don't make the mistake I did thinking that there would be a section that would be easy to swallow. McNiel made even the elementary ideas powerful and poignant. I was challenged in every chapter and better for it. She did all this without being preachy or unnecessarily provocative or polarizing. And I think for a lot of people, like we have talked on our podcast about books that are more direct at the political nature or the election cycles. And I think a lot for those people that are like, that's not quite what I'm looking for. But when we talk about loving there's nothing more deeply political than the way we love our neighbors, than the way we love our enemies. And so it's super relevant without having to talk about those things in such a direct way. And I think that is so much of what I loved. It was a challenge. Like the book was a challenge to me. It wasn't abstract. It was really concrete. It was practical. I came away from the book encouraged to be the more loving person that Jesus called me to be. When you set out to write this, like you talked about pitching the idea, like what was the impulse? Like what was the thing that like lit the fire in you to say, I have something to say about this? What was that?
Yeah, I think what always, as a writer, what always hooks me is on a topic is a discrepancy that I'm seeing. And the discrepancy that kind of was the impetus for this book was that when I open the Bible, when I'm reading the Gospels, when I'm seeing in particular Jesus' time on earth and Jesus' instructions for his followers and the apostles' letters to each other and to the church, to the early churches, I'm hearing this a powerful, again, message. Like, we are people of resurrection. We believe that God has conquered death. Like, they were living in the midst of a very dangerous empire. That the Roman Empire existed through, Roman peace was created through danger, through violence. That's how they brought about, quote, peace. And in fact, they killed Jesus. This is how Jesus died, in the most humiliating and painful way we have yet figured out how to kill a person. And so again, there was nothing safe about it. But in the opening, I'm maybe getting a little excited here, but the opening story that I tell is of the resurrection day, of the morning where the women are terrified to find an empty tomb because they're not safe. Their teacher has just been killed by the state. And so what's going on? It's, if anything goes not according to plan, it means more danger for them. And then it ends that the day ends with the friends huddled in a room, together, trying to figure things out. And then suddenly Jesus appears. And I say, nothing has made them safer. Their teacher is still an enemy of the state. And now he's alive. But somehow everything changes for them. They stop huddling. They stop shaking in fear. They go out. They tell everyone. And what is it about the resurrection that changed not their circumstances, but their outlook and their posture? Because they are still a people who are going to be hunted and killed and made to suffer and marginalized by the many religious and political powers of their day. But they suddenly were filled with joy. They were suddenly empowered to follow Jesus' path of caring for their neighbors, but also caring for their strangers, caring for enemies. They were empowered to spread this good news of resurrection, of power over death. So I'm seeing this just incredible story that we as Christians believe is true on the one hand. But on the other hand, I'm turning on the radio, I'm listening to sermons, I'm picking up books, I'm turning on the television, I'm going on the internet, and I'm finding just these incredibly, paralyzingly fearful messages about how we need to be very afraid of the people who live in our town. Like, we can't send our kids to the schools. We need to be careful where we buy a home, that the immigrants that are coming into our communities are extremely dangerous, that there are enemies all around. We have to protect ourselves. Like, we may even need to go to war in order to there's just so much fear. And these messages are increasingly being associated with the word Christian. And that's the discrepancy. Again, I went on and on, but that's the discrepancy that weighed on me every moment of every day. And I wanted to explore that. I wanted to say, if Jesus says that his followers are the ones known not for their fear, but for their love, then where are Jesus' true followers? Is the word Christian a helpful word to help us find them? What does it look like to actually take Jesus' resurrection and his invitation seriously in a society that is just drenched, absolutely marinating in fear from one day to the next?
Yeah. That it's a perfect segue to my next question. My last paragraph of the review says, throughout the entire read, McNiel anchored the problem to her opening section, a section on fear and how it has too often taken hold of Christian practice. She does not offer deceptive solace for a moment, our call to live in courage and not let fear define how we see others could cost us everything. But that is the way of our teacher. I loved this connection and how you couch this whole conversation with a connection to fear and how it keeps us from love. I kept seeing all of these echoes from Brene Brown, one of my favorite authors and thinkers, and obviously the fearing bravely versus a play on the other quote. I just loved that. What kinds of things have you heard or learned, whether it's in yourself or from, I know when I published my book, you end up having all of these additional conversations after it comes out.
Yes.
It's like post-research from everybody. What kind of things have you heard or learned about fear and its connection to loving others since you've written this book?
That's such a good question. Well, part of the privilege of writing a book is the people who will reach out to you after.
Yes.
So listeners, please feel free to find me online. I would love to hear from you. And hearing the stories of how the rubber has met the road for people, for communities, people sometimes reaching out with questions because they're saying, I have this really challenging scenario in which we are in an unsafe situation. And so we are afraid, but we also are hearing Jesus' call to respond with love. Where's the balance there? And obviously I don't have easy answers for anything, but I'm so grateful to be a part of the conversation because it's conversation that I'm hoping we'll have. But to more specifically answer your question, one of the most mind-blowing things that I think I've learned about fear through this whole process is, as we said earlier in this conversation, that fear is not inherently a bad thing. It's what keeps me from running in front of a car. It's what keeps me from jumping out of my window, even though it looks so beautiful outside. We know that there's some danger, and our brain is equipped to tell us, to help us stay alive. And so that is a beautiful, wonderful gift from God. But it can be exploited. It can be exploited by our own thought processes and our own psyches, and it is absolutely being exploited by people outside of our heads who want us to submit to them, to surrender to them, and they know that we will if we are afraid and believe that they are offering us protection. So I think watching the many ways that we are being exploited, that this good gift that God has given us is being used to destroy us, I think that's what I have learned the most.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I can tell you as I read it that every chapter is on different group, like had these 3 sections of friends and strangers and enemies. In every section, I found myself going, oh, there's a place that I'm holding back. It can be in my own church and fellowship. There's a place that I'm holding back. It could be in people in my own community. And I didn't realize that fear was creating a narrative, but it was like, oh, I need to fight. I need to fight that narrative of fear and press into that and see what's on it. Like that. The whole book was one of those encouraging moments. I feel like God gives us these things that kind of keep calling us back to things we know, like we inherently know, but we have to be challenged to like, nope, don't just know it, like live that. And that was a big part of my experience.
So much of it is we're sometimes, I think, assume that our faith is something we know, something we understand, something we agree to. And there's definitely a component to that. And I'm an MDiv student, I love ideas. But Jesus is saying, feed my sheep. He's saying, go to those who are hungry, go to those who are thirsty, go to those who need shelter. If you see someone dying along the side of the road, like it's on you to make sure that they're cared for. Even if it's dangerous. And the story of the Good Samaritan is one of the foundational stories that I tell in this book. And I just am so challenged by Jesus' invitation through that story to not look at scenarios through a lens of what's in it for me or what will this cost me, but what is needed? What am I being invited to give?
Yeah, I was thinking about even just Marty says that it's not overly provocative, but I think even the titles of some of your chapters are very provocative. Like chapter 4, Next Door Strangers. And chapter 5, Who are the people in your neighborhood? That is something that I've, noticed in the last couple of years. I've been in my house 10 years, and it's only in the last year or two that I've actually gotten to know more than one or two of my neighbors.
Yeah.
And so that even that really hit me. What are some things that you've learned about getting to know the people who actually physically share space with you in your neighborhood? And maybe your tomato sales are part of that, or whatever it is. What is the thing that we should take away as far as just getting to know the people that we actually live around?
Well, as Paul says, not that I have already attained all this. I wrote this book for myself. I wrote this book because I wanted to explore why I don't know my neighbors, why I am afraid to care for strangers, why I don't know how to love my enemy. So I'm definitely not putting myself up as the paragon of solutions. But one of the stories that I tell in Fearing Bravely is of a night when there was a terrible fire a few blocks from our house. And as the sirens just kept going by and as the noise got louder and louder, everyone came out. It's probably 11 o'clock at night. We're all standing around in our pajamas, watching from a safe distance, trying to figure out if everyone is okay, if there's something we can do. But as we're chatting with each other, we're realizing we live 3 or 4 doors down from each other and we've never met each other, or we recognize each other's faces, but we don't know each other's names and certainly not each other's stories. And it was so informative for me, provocative maybe even for me, to realize that in this moment of crisis, we all answer the call out of curiosity, if not out of compassion, but we really don't know each other. And how can I follow Jesus' instruction to love my neighbor the way I love myself if I don't know my neighbor? A lot of that is how American society is set up. And I do a lot of sacrificial caregiving for the people in my life, and they just don't happen to be the people who live next door to me. But that's still a challenge I want to take seriously, because it wasn't pretty low down on the list of things Jesus said is important to God. It was literally right up there with loving God.
Right.
So I'd love for us to explore as a Christian community, how can we do this number one thing that Jesus has asked of us if we're not investing time in getting to even know the people in our neighborhoods.
Well, and this is, when you say that, these are this is going to be one of those years, I'm sure, election cycles, the cultural narrative we see in the news and all around us. This is where you start to despair, no matter what side you're on or who wins or this is where you're the problems are so big. How could I ever make a difference? But the things that you're talking about in this book that we're talking about here today, these are the concrete things that are actually, I can put my hope in, because these things do make a difference. I don't know how I'm going to change the entire world or change our country or change even Christianity or evangelicalism, but I know how I could make a difference in my church.
Yeah.
I know how I could, getting to know people in my own subdivision, that's a small thing, but that's a huge thing.
Right.
And that could have a huge impact on, there's 111 homes on this subdivision that I live in. That I can start to get my, going to the school district, getting involved, meeting people that I wouldn't otherwise. Okay, those are concrete things that actually make a hopeful, resurrection-drenched difference in the world. And so I just love that part of it, is a way that we can fight that despair right now in our culture is saying, okay, but who lives who are the 10 families closest to me geographically? Yeah. How can I sell 150 plants worth of tomatoes off my I do. I love that. But, well, that's my favorite book, but I also know you've written other books. Catherine, what other books and projects have you, and you can feel free to share them, talk about it, all of them. What other projects and books have you released in the past? What are some of your favorite moments or things that you've done as a creator?
Okay.
What do you got out there?
Well, I am pretty close to a full-time writer, editor, and speaker. So I have created a lot of things, but I think I'll focus my time with you on my books. Fearing Bravely, Risking Love for Neighbors, Strangers, and Enemies is my most recent book. But my first book is called Long Days of Small Things, Motherhood as a Spiritual Discipline. And this is written, the word mother is in the title, but it's really about caregivers and how the work that we're doing when we're pouring ourselves out, we're exhausted, we're giving, is not something that keeps us away from the practices of faith, even though we might not have time to go to a Bible study or we might not be awake enough to pray without falling asleep. That these are the places where God is meeting us, that God was literally born and God literally took on a body, and that God has both incarnated and redeemed the world through these most physical, bodily aspects of our existence. And so the seasons of life when we're bogged down with caring for our bodies or other people's bodies is not a distraction from the spiritual world. It's actually where God has come and met us. So the back of that one says, Rich soul-inspiring practices for moms who have neither quiet nor time. So
yes.
That's a favorite of mine, but of course they all are. My second book is called All Shall Be Well, Awakening to God's Presence in His Messy, Abundant World. And this is also both of these first two books, Long Days of Small Things and All Shall Be Well. Actually, Fearing Bravely too. I wanted, like you said in the bio, to mingle theology with the stuff of our actual lives, like the things that our hands are actually touching and our feet are actually walking through. And so, as I did in the first book about parenting, I did in the second book about just being outside. Both the ebb and flow of the seasons. The book starts in spring, and all of the spiritual fruit that we are invited to imagine in the spring, like hope and faith and beauty, that things are coming that we can't see yet. Then it goes into summer and the abundance and the purposefulness of summer, and then autumn with surrender, with trust as we head into the unknown. And then winter, seasons of dormancy, which come with both an invitation to rest as well as a deep invitation to trust, because we don't know if we'll make it through. And then, as a spoiler, it ends in spring again, in resurrection. Ooh. So I definitely tell a lot of stories from my garden there, but just inviting the reader and myself to open our eyes to God's presence in the world that He created as creator. So those are my 3 books that are out right now. I am actually finishing up the edits for my 4th book, which is going to be, the first 3 are with Nav Press. This 4th one is going to be with InterVarsity Press, and it is about mid-faith crisis.
I love that. Goodness, that's a great little phrase there.
Yeah, thank you. The full title and probably the cover and even pre-orders will probably be available by the time this podcast is released, but at the moment I don't have all that. But it will be titled Mid-Faith Crisis. And I'm hoping I have told stories of all of the very real, very legitimate reasons why we might hit a wall in our life cycle of faith and say, what is this? How do I even move forward? But as with my other books, I'm trying to be very invitational, not preachy, but talk about actual paths forward.
You do that well, like just as a writer, as the pieces of of your art that I get to interact with. Like I know our good friend, shared friend, Caitlin, I think at some point talked about like being a trusted partner, a trusted guide in projects like this. And I definitely felt like you were talking about stuff directly. And yet I felt like you were this co-laborer, like you didn't have it all together, but you were challenging us. And it was I just love the voice that you use in your writing. So you do that well.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. That's what I pray to do.
Yes. Brent, what do you got?
I'm wondering, I haven't read your other two books. They're out. But is there like a through line between the three books? Because it almost seems like those first two are like, here's some things that can enrich your life. And then you get those out and people are like, yeah, but I just can't do that. And it's like, oh, there's something blocking us from engaging these practices and seeing, the all will be, like, there's this fear that just kind of like clouds over the rest of it.
Yeah.
Like, is that just my own made up idea of how these are connected, or is there something to that?
No, there might be something to that. I think one thing that I just keep going back through in all of these books is that Christians believe that God is here, that we don't need to, figure out some sort of riddle to find God, that we don't need to get a master's of divinity to find God, that we can just take a breath and realize that the breath we're breathing in is God's breath, because that's how he created the world, and that he came here and he has rested here with us. And so whether we're very busy caregiving, whether we are walking across the lawn on our way to the car, whether we are chatting with neighbors at the grocery store, that God is present. And that impacts both how we function in the world from a personal perspective. We can be reaching for love, we can be reaching for peace and receiving those things because they are here, because Jesus is alive. But it also impacts how we are postured towards others, that as we are receiving that presence, that we are invited to be that presence to those around us as well. And so I think that would be what links them together, if there was something.
It's that mingling that you keep talking about. It's that making theology cool in all these cool places, because
I hope so.
It really does matter. Like, theology done well really changes. Yeah. Really changes everything.
Well, and theology done poorly changes everything too.
That's the truth.
That matters to me a lot. So I want to have good conversations about what we say about God.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So you mentioned that you have that project coming out, and if those links are out, we're going to share all that stuff in the show notes so that people can know. Do you have anything else you're working on that's on the horizon that is ahead of you, that's coming out, that anything else that we ought to know about from Catherine McNiel and what to be looking for?
Yeah, feel free to tell us about the other things that you do. You said, you have all these full-time, things, and like, you can share about more than your books. Go for it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, actually, you mentioned Nav Press and our friends there. They hired me to be the general editor for a women's devotional Bible, which will also be coming out in 2025. So I'm extremely excited about that. It's obviously, I didn't rewrite the Bible, but I did work with a number of authors to create devotional materials that are going to be inserted inside of the Bible. And the reason why I'm excited about it is that when Nav Press asked me to do this, I said, I don't know that I would buy a women's devotional Bible. And they said, that is exactly why we want you to be the editor.
Yeah, they did.
So we went deep. We talked about a lot of topics that are in the Bible that maybe the average male pastor or commentator would prefer not to think about, or maybe doesn't even realize how the way it has been taught or interpreted has impacted women. And so we did not pull any punches, and I'm extremely excited about that project, which is also coming out through Nav Press in 2025. Otherwise, I write for a lot of organizations, sometimes with my name attached, sometimes not. But if you'd like to Google Catherine McNiel, as long as you spell my name right, you'll probably come up with more things than you were hoping to find.
Perfect. Well, do you have like a website that people should go to,
I do.
or social media that you prefer, or anything like that?
Absolutely. Everything is at Catherine McNiel. So my website is catherinemcneil.com. And if you go there, there will be a little pop-up where you can sign up for my newsletter, which goes out very rarely. So there is no chance of me spamming you. So don't hesitate there. And then all my social media is at Catherine McNiel. As long as you spell it right. But I'm on Twitter, Threads, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. You can find me at Catherine McNiel.
Well, your name will be in the title of this episode, so it'll be an easy reference for people to find that.
Okay.
And I love that everybody's just on board. Like the general public is just like, it's still Twitter. We don't even care.
Yeah,
Elon.
absolutely.
It's just Twitter. I love it.
Power to the people.
I love it.
Yeah, and I do love hearing from readers and listeners. So if you're not sure that you should really reach out, please do.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, we will have all of those links in the show notes as well, so people can just click on that and get to the right thing. We'll add the Bible in there whenever that is available for pre-order or order whenever. I mean, people could be listening to this at any point in time. So once those things are available, if we talked about on the episode, we'll get those links in there. And people will find all that stuff. But Catherine, it's been a great conversation, and I love your heart for people, and thank you so much for sharing a bit about yourself with us and our audience.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'm grateful anytime I can actually use these words to talk to real people and hopefully continue to spark conversation about what it looks like to represent God well and God's love in this world.
Keep mingling that theology. I love it.
That's right.
Keep at it.
Thank you.
Amen. Well, listeners can go to BayModestFellowship.com to find the show notes and anything else that they need. You can get in touch with us on the website as well. So thanks for joining us on the Baymod podcast this week. We'll talk to you again soon.